Hello, everybody, and welcome to Tarter Source. It's not the usual voice you're used to hearing and this, but it's a special one and a bittersweet one, at least for me, and I'm sure of a lot of your fans out there. Steve Tarter we have as our guest today on his own show. And we're going to be talking to him about his career as he gets ready to move off into retirement, or whatever you might want to call it.
Thank you, Dennis.
Steve.
Thank you, Dennis. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it is kind of bittersweet. But I look at it this way. I'm still going to be around for people to talk to, and I'll probably still be talking. So it's the end of a chapter, not the book. Okay.
Well, we definitely want to have you back here, especially on the podcast.
That'd be great. I love the podcast. I've always felt that the podcast is the mini radio that I never got to get into, or a little bit, but just it satisfies that.
I have a feeling you're gonna be taking over the show as we go on, even though.
Well, out of force of habit, but just push it down.
But I figure I've been around here for a while now. It's about 7 years, and one of the names that always comes up when people say, "Oh, you work at the Journal-Star," and they say, "Oh, do you know Steve Tarter?" I says, "Oh yeah, he's a great guy," and you're very popular around town. Why is that?
Well, first of all, it comes from having hung around a long time. You get to know a lot of people, and I think the whole thing with sort of reaching out to the public through radio or podcast, newspapers, whatever, people get to see your name a lot, hear you, and I know this is true of TV people, where when they're on the TV for years and years, you almost feel like you know them. I mean, you have a bond with them that, and many people you do kind of know, because we call people all the time asking them, usually at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I got a 5 o'clock deadline. What is it about such and such? And thankfully, many of them respond. So you do develop, I think, a rapport with a lot of folks. And
how many years have you been here?
I've been here since. I went to school at Bradley.
Oh, don't go that far back. We'll get there. But how long have you been at the Journal-Star?
Journal-Star, 20 years. It'll be 98 when I came on board.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell a little bit about Steve. He's an excellent reporter. He's one of those where you don't have people calling you up. Oh, this story. There's something wrong with this story. No, Steve's very good. He's accurate. He's very prolific. He writes a lot of stories, and he could write a story just about anything, from doing a restaurant review to covering City Hall, to covering Caterpillar or any other of the big businesses, especially agriculture. You got a lot of experience there. You name it, you've done it. You've covered it. What are some of your favorite stories over the years?
Well, I think some of the favorite stories would be, I think they involve media, because I do like reporting. I think the beauty of the newspaper. And I hope this holds true, is the daily newspaper is the one medium that will look at other media. Whereas TV won't talk about, they'll talk about somebody leaving or, but radio, for instance, radio people move around a lot. It goes unnoticed. It doesn't get reported, except by this branch of the media. So I do like, I've enjoyed. Enjoy is probably the wrong word, but I'm interested in the WCBU story that's going on now. We still don't know.
Public radio?
Where that's going, the public radio. I enjoyed, when you mentioned agriculture, I always said when I took on the business beat that at that time involved ag reporting, I knew about as much about farming as I do about brain surgery, because I grew up in downtown Boston. I never lived on a farm. I never really been to a farm. But the beauty of I guess this business is you talk to people who do. It isn't my knowledge, it's their knowledge, and we're just hopefully calling the right people, enough people.
And that's what our job is. We become instant experts on a story, and then we'll move on to the next story.
And it is about knowing the right people to ask, and not to say we always know the right people, because wish that we did, because there's always somebody you should have talked to Chuck over there in electronics, because he really he wrote a book about it. Oh, I didn't know that, and just today someone asked, sent a note to the paper about the reporting we did of the robotics competition, and it was like, well, you didn't mention Metamora or these other schools. Well, there's good reason for that. We didn't know. You can't know everything sometimes, and I think that speaks for people's belief in maybe the paper and other things, media in general. How come you didn't have such and such? Well, there's always a good answer. We didn't know.
That's right.
It's there's no all-seeing Oz back here behind this curtain that we can go to. A lot of times we have a good background because we covered this stuff for a long time, but other times we rely on others.
And the job has changed over time. Looking at, you've done almost 140 podcasts in just a couple of years. So that's changed how we get content and news out to people, and you've had your blogs. They're very popular blogs and that. And
I remember your predecessor, John Plevka, calling Paul Gordon and me into his office a number of years ago and saying, we need you guys to write a blog, business blog. And at the time, Paul and I were thinking, don't we write enough? We're writing business stories all the time, and the whole blog concept was a little kind of cloudy. And we both did start writing blogs, and I found out I love it because it gives you that variety. It's kind of a diary entry where you write about things, hopefully, that may interest other people. You wonder sometimes. You got to be careful you don't jump on the same things over and over. But it gives you a freedom that otherwise, we have to follow the news of the day. But
you can write about anything.
You can write about anything, and frankly, that's the most fascinating thing about. Well, I've always said my job at the paper is my lifelong learning class, because while you think you know something, usually you wind up realizing, I didn't know that part of it.
You know a lot of things. I know you and Scott Hilliard are going back and forth. You guys sit right across from each other, and throughout the day,
two old guys.
Yeah, one of you throw out a nugget of information, and the other one throw it back, and it's just I sit back and I listen and learn. And I learn too, just from the two of you talking.
Well, that I think it's fun to cover that stuff, because the beauty of I think somebody who's worked on a newspaper is, and this is the one thing that I think we forget, is you get to cover such a wide spectrum of the community. I mean, Peoria is a great example where you can talk to the mayor, you can talk to council, you can talk to people in business professions. They'll call you. Phil Luciano, obviously, his whole presence is known by so many people here in this community. You can take that for granted, but it's really a neat thing, because somebody will kind of be looking out for you and say, well, you should talk to so and so about this subject. And when you do, it's usually pretty rewarding. So I enjoy it. So
when we hear your voice, we hear a little bit of East Coast, right? Where are you from?
All right. Well, you asked for it. I'm born in England, Felixstowe, England, which is right on the coast. I came over to America with my family when I was 2, so I was really raised in America, in the United States. My parents are both British, so my mother is still alive and in New Hampshire. I hope to see her soon. She's still got that accent, stronger than mine. Mine has become Midwesternized, I guess you could say. But I grew up in Boston and came out here in '67 to Bradley.
To go to Bradley.
Graduated in '72.
What was your degree in?
Journalism.
Okay.
Yeah, I started with English and went to journalism because English was too hard, and journalism was better. And journalism at the time, we're still using typewriters. Come on, I mean, it was pre-internet. It was a whole different world. Paul Snyder was the dean up there. Jack Fott was another great journalism teacher. Those guys would kind of really get on you about being accurate. And then, of course, I got on the school paper, this Bradley Scout, which to this day is Chris Carregard, our Simon editor, is the advisor for. That was the training of it was a weekly, but he got you on deadline. You realized, hey, this is kind of interesting. You can do all kinds of things. The times were a little different, I have to tell you. By the time I got to be editor of the Scout, it was 71, 72. The 60s were over, but I was hanging on, I guess you could say, because the hair's long. There was protest in the air. Chuck Graham, who's on the city council, just talked to him about this the other day. He was our right-wing guy. He wasn't on the paper per se, but he would write conservative letters to the editor and opinions. We had him, I think, as a column for a while. And we kind of humored him because we were also liberal, and we had to have a conservative voice. But I remember, but Vietnam was going on. There was a lot of anti-administration fervor and countercultural stuff that I enjoyed. But that was all that.
Did you enjoy, get involved in any of those marches?
Yeah. Well, I spent a semester I did the Washington semester program, the spring of '71. Where you attend American University, but your credits go to Bradley. I think that program is still going on. I think it's expanded. But that was pure political science, which wasn't my main thing. But spring of '71 is when they had the big roundup of people, protesters. Wasn't involved in that personally, but it was going on while we were there. Saw the troops overhead as we went to our seminars. That was a fabulous experience. I got to intern at Abner Mikva, the Chicago congressman's office, and the rest of them all were like, I think my roommate Bruce, and I'm forgetting his last name, but Bruce, he did an internship with Walter Mondale from his home state of Minnesota. So we were all involved with politics to some extent, and there was a bomb scare in the house that year. We all had to get searched every time we went in. But yeah, I think we were involved in the sense of we're on the ground watching all this stuff happen, and just found it. There were fast times. I mean, there was always something going on, and you kind of miss that a little bit because I see the college scene today. It's a little more staid, a little more materialistic. I won't get into this in my day business because I know how that goes.
You're not that kind of guy, though.
Well, I wouldn't say that, but I do kind of, there was an edge that we had, whether or not it was deserved or not, because we're also pretty naive. We were right and everyone else was wrong. I think that goes with youth to some extent. But no, I think we had a good training ground there because you really. If you're looking at, say, the subject of Vietnam, which was such a huge issue, and we're not going to debate here, but it was a case of where you thought, hey, maybe the government's off on this one. You started questioning your leaders, which is not a bad thing. I think maybe it's gone too far sometimes, but that was certainly the case then. And
so you graduated from Bradley. Where'd you go next?
I went back east, thinking, okay, I'll do something there. The summer of '72, I spent lounging around Boston. My friend Charlie Steele, who was a Bradley grad too, he suddenly popped up in Boston, and he was looking for work. So he was there for a while, then he disappeared. I sent out applications to small papers, thinking, okay, I'll wind up in Connecticut or Maine or wherever it was. At that time, there was a market for that stuff. People probably listening to this now think, newspapers, what kind of career plan was that? Well, hey, they were okay back then, but they were a lot of work. When I went down and did the interviews, the guy in Connecticut, I can't remember where it was exactly, it was a small weekly there, and he said, you work hard. He said, you'll do this, you'll do that. And while he's telling me all this, I'm kind of like backing out, thinking, I don't want to work that hard. But anyway, he said, but you're near New York, and you can get a start in your career and all that. And I thought, well, so anyway, to make a long story short, I wound up going all the way west to an interview that my mother's friend had at a Psychology Today. That was the magazine. I think it's still around. But they had a book arm that did textbooks, and for some reason they had a job opening. I went for the interview, blew it off, and wound up sitting in Cardiff, California, which is run by San Diego, with absolutely nothing, no money, nothing, and wound up working. My first job as a Bradley grad was as third shift dishwasher at Denny's, which is very near the racetrack that they have there outside of San Diego. So that was my career start. Okay, and I spent there a few months, then came east, back in Boston, worked for a little bit in just odds and ends, came back to Peoria in the summer of '73 and started a whole series of things that...
and how long was that after you graduated?
It's been about a year now.
Okay.
About a year. I'm back in Peoria because people I know here had a comfort level with the community and just started doing I worked at the Bergner's Warehouse, so that was my first job back. That's the building out there by on Allen Road by Walmart. So on the other side of the street. It used to be Bergner's Warehouse because we used to have Bergner's. People listening in, where was that? Yeah, that was a big store that's gone now. But did a series of other things, including post office, and finally got on back kind of towards journalism at the Observer, which was weekly. And Tom Sanders owned the paper at the time, and I was doing layout for the Observer. So, and he said, oh, by the way, you can write something if you want. So I did. I wrote a media column, anxious to get a hold of anything I could. And one thing led to another, and I spent a number of years at the Observer, which at that time was fairly successful. Didn't pay anything, but was a weekly that I think some people might remember in the North Peoria area, a suburban. I wrote, when I started writing for it, I wrote stories like Woman on the Go, In the Kitchen, not hard news really. They let me do a little sports. Dick Versace era of basketball was going on. That was kind of fun. But media column, kind of a blog kind of thing. It wasn't internet, of course, but that freedom was there because they sold so many ads. You could write freely. They took the pyramid model and turned it upside down, where the pyramid model, for those who don't know it, is you try to get all your important stuff up early because the story could be edited. If it's cut, you don't want to have your main thing lost. So you try to pack it all in up front. Well, you wind up doing that anyway, but that wasn't important to the Observer. We would often have stories where we might use 5 pictures with it. Just kind of after a while it'd be like, well, what are this picture? It's a lot like that picture. But that was the Observer, and it was a good experience, and I had started contacting people there. That turned into the Penny Press, which was I had it in this last year, which we're at about 81, and the Penny Press had been successful. Those who remember this. Bud Carter had been the editor. He was a former Channel 25 newsman, and he took it over. And it was the closest thing Peoria had to a sort of a muckraking journal. He'd jump on certain issues, very selective. Well, when we took it over, the Observer took it over, he kind of pulled the teeth, and he put me in there and said, just run it like the Observer. Well, it didn't quite work with the Penny Press, and we wound up... I wound up having going down with a ship there. They canceled the paper and me in the spring of '82, or early in '82, probably February, and that set me free again. I wound up doing things. Do you want me to carry on with this?
Well, let's just remind people that I'm Dennis Anderson, the executive editor of the Journal Star. We're here with Steve Tarter. I took over his show so we could do a story, do an interview with him about what his life is all about. And we're somewhere in the 80s on his resume. And pretty soon, let's get to the CityLink.
CityLink came up in '82. I spent a little time with Royal Duncan at Royal Publishing. He kind of tided me over. He got me writing some things, and he got a little money in there. And then there's an opening for marketing at GP Transit, which was what the CityLink was called then. And I thought, well, I don't know marketing, but maybe I can write and whatever. And I wound up getting that job and spending 16 years with the Transit District, which is great. I love it. Down-to-earth people. You became sort of challenged.
It was a job on the move.
Oh, right. It was a job on the move. We could have used that line. It was a job on the move. It was also a
Steve's
challenge.
good with dad jokes.
Oh yeah, bad jokes are my thing. No, it was good because in a city the size of Peoria, and Peoria used to have streetcars. Of course, when that was the going thing. So there's a transit history here. But in the era of the automobile, which unfortunately we've embraced all too readily, I say unfortunately because at the time I'm working at the transit district, and it was a hard sell to get people on the bus because the folks that normally rode were those that couldn't afford cars, old, disabled, or people that just had an ideal situation. I took the bus and it took them right where they needed. They had a good deal. Other people would say it just takes too long because in Peoria you don't have the frequency of Chicago or a larger city, so you spend a lot of time either at the bus stop or on the bus and waiting for your transfer if you have to.
Reading the paper. I mean, it's doable. I'm not trying to discourage people from it, but you just didn't have folks suddenly saying, "Oh, you know what? I'm going to start riding the bus tomorrow." Because it's still so easy to get around, and Peoria is the kind of situation, and we know this now if you've lived here for any length of time, where you really need a car to get shopping done, to get to your job, to get the kids to where they have to go. Everything is spread out. It's not like it used to be where everything was downtown, which is when the streetcars were in their heyday. So, but that was a great experience. We did all kinds of things. The marketing of the transit district put you in contact with everybody. Civic center, schools, So
clubs.
that prepared you for a job here.
It did. It really did, because I felt by the time 1998 rolled around, when I got over here, I knew more about Peoria than I certainly did before, and I had people that I had known in these various areas that well, now I'd be calling them for a story. So that was a nice transition, but good people at the transit district, and I always enjoyed that.
Now, how did you get the job at the Journal-Star?
Well, I sent a note to Jack, who was the editor of Jack Bremeyer, and an email. Just hey, I'd be interested in a job, blah blah blah. And I thought, well, at the time I'm 49 years old. Don't know if they want somebody coming out of marketing. It's been a while since I've written for the Observer, and that might not qualify as, the training you need for a daily. So I didn't know, but then next thing I know, I got a call back from the Journal-Star that said, well, if you'd be interested, there's a position, temporary. They said it was temporary, but it was full-time. So I think I worked on a temp basis until whatever, I passed the audition. And, then we got in the guild and been here ever since. So that was the process. But, of course, it was a case where you learn from the ground up, and it was appropriate, because even though I was older than the average person starting, I needed to go through that period of, okay, this is what's going on, and there are a lot of things you need to learn when you're doing the paper thing, because frankly, people think the story writes itself. Yeah. It's just like it's sort of a wonderful thing. It takes a little effort, and it's not it's not rocket science. I think anyone out there listening to my voice can do it, but you do have to have some of editors and people that know what they're doing are good sort of teachers.
Did I just see recently you ran across a story that you did where you got punched out by Muhammad Ali?
Well,
is that true?
Yeah. Well, yeah. He pulled his punches. So this is going back to when I was in the Observer, and Ali came to town. I think 1980. He had retired. Okay, but he's still a young man. He came there with a candidate. They were running for attorney general somewhere in the state of Illinois, and he was making stops across. And they had him do a thing down in the south side. And after he gave his little speech for the candidate, he went next door to the boxing club. And these were kids. And of course, Ali, being the great showman that he was, in his business suit, sparred with the kids. And and they were trying. They had gloves, and of course he wasn't doing anything. He was doing nothing more than talking to them and taking their punches. But he was a presence, and of course he was always entertaining. Well, I had a Superman T-shirt on. I put on to go down there just to do the story, and it was a winter day, and I took it off.
You did that on purpose?
No. I hadn't even thought of it. Jack Rogowski, who later worked for this paper, was a photographer at the Observer at the time, spotted that and said, "Oh, Superman versus." This is the way we think in the newspaper world, which was silly because my hair's long. I don't resemble Superman at all, but I'm big versus small for the kids. So they put the gloves on me, and I always remember the guy putting the gloves on me, looking at me kind of askew and saying, this would be no time to try something stupid like, like trying to sucker punch the champ. And I thought, how dumb do I look? Why would I even attempt such a thing? Well, I get in the ring, and I realize sort of the first thing that you see, there's people around who are kind of curious about what is this guy doing in there with Ali, because all of a sudden it'd been kids, and now there's this older guy. And I'm holding the gloves, and I realize I really don't know how to fight. I think I boxed once in camp, and I fought to a draw, and that was my extent of my training. And so now I'm facing Ali, and of course he sizes it up immediately and starts calling me a sissy and dancing around me and provoking me, like punch me, and well, finally he did, and it was like hitting a sandbag. And the next thing I know, he's gone, and so suddenly that was over, and I was out. But no, he was amazing, because unfortunately he went back to fighting after that, and I think probably took a punch too many, and we know what happened.
What in the last 20 years, what are some of your favorite stories?
Well, I think there's so many, because I think the people that you come in contact with here, it's fascinating when you can find people. And I know I'm going to leave some people out here because there are so many, but you find the people, and that's I think the beauty of this profession, that work in the community, that aren't trying to get publicity, that aren't trying to, because you come in contact with a lot of politicians, and there's nothing wrong with that. You got to have them, but they're trying to get attention. They're trying to, get in the paper, get TV, get coverage, not necessarily just for themselves, but for whatever their cause is. And then you run across other people who don't have any desire to tell you anything other than, hey, I'm here to work in this, either teacher working with kids. I'm trying to think of names now that are not coming, but the bus drivers that I remember, I thought, there's a job that I couldn't do. I couldn't manage a big 30-foot bus, driving it around streets of Peoria. But putting up with, sometimes a lot of rudeness. You're there and somebody throws their coins in and give me a transfer, or something. And they're not trying to be rude, but they're not realizing that's the daily routine.
So you're looking for the unsung heroes.
Unsung heroes, and there's so many of those that they're not, the names aren't coming, but I think that's the beauty of this job, is that it gives you access to those people, and you get humbled by it, because you realize, wow, this person is maybe a volunteer. They've done something else, and now they're volunteering their time, and we write it up, and we try to give those folks some play. But there's so many doing that, and especially in a town like Peoria, it really gives you pause, because you find out, boy, I could do a little more. That's a good segue, because there is something you've done quite a bit of work at the Apollo Theater. What got you involved? I know you're a big movie buff. Oh yeah, well that was it.
But that was a part-time job for you.
Well, yeah, it was a labor of love. I think the Apollo, which I think was probably 03 to 13, in that range, 10-year period or something. I think what I noticed there was it came from doing a story on, not necessarily on the Apollo Theater, but on, I think, some of the stores that are there. Tom Leiter, the attorney, owns the Apollo and he has his office there. And it was something related to that. And in the course of that story, he said, yeah, I wish we had something going on at the Apollo, or it was, casual comment. And I thought, well, you could run old movies. And again, I say that because, I like the old movies, but now you're talking about a time as they're coming out on DVD, remastered. There's a whole new. You're not looking at something with flickering. The sound is fuzzy, and it's a lot of these old movies now are made to look new, and you have this ability to show them again in a theater setting that you really can't. You don't get the same impact when you watch it at home. I know the sets are getting bigger and all of that, but when you're in a theater, the lights go down, the film comes up, you're among other people, it's still a unique, I think, experience. So we had that opportunity, and I really enjoyed thinking about that. And I think, again, this is the beauty of Peoria. You can do it. If I'm somewhere else, somebody else is doing that. But I went to Tom and said, hey, I think I can get ICC involved and get an overhead projector. And they did. John Irwin was the president then at ICC, and he was an old movie buff, and said, I'll tell you what, we'll put in the projector if you let us come use the theater. Well, that was a good deal, and I think they used it quite a bit, or at least occasionally. But that was the way we did it, and I think we learned some things as we went through that. The one thing that I thought we'd start off, get the thing kicked off, a robotic film fest. This was in like 04, 05, 03, I can't remember exactly. But we ran about a dozen robot movies.
Okay.
Tobor the Great, you name them. This is Terminator. Any movie that's had a robot in it, we probably ran it. And we overdid it because we had films there at 10 o'clock in the morning on Saturday with 3 people there, and it's like, oh, no, you got to do it sort of properly, so you got to slow down, and thankfully I'm working at the Journal-Star so we can market it, at least get a little blurb in the paper. But we developed, I think, a following. We ran about twice a month. There were times when we had some pretty good crowds there. It doesn't take much to fill up the Apollo. It's only 150 seats, which, by the way, is the seating at the Riverfront Museum's IMAX.
Oh, really?
Only 150. But, of course, a much bigger screen there. Everything's modern. But I like the Apollo very much. I got to give kudos to Mary Sutherland, who was still is secretary there and the office manager, who kind of oversees the Apollo.
What would be your favorite movie?
I think Casablanca.
Okay.
Because it's got Bogey, it's got World War II, it's got all those lines that the people recall, use it. They got the music. You got Dooley Wilson singing there. The romance, the big move at the end. People haven't seen it. That has it all, and I think the very fact that sort of has stood the test of time. You don't hear too many people bad mouthing Casablanca, or it's overrated. Now most people go, they may not think it's great, but they understand why people like it.
You've got quite a family connection to World War II too, with your mom, right?
Oh yeah, my mom and dad coming from England. Yeah, my mom was evacuated during the war because she was young, and they sent the kids to the country. So she was sent off to I think a couple of years. So that was the standard thing there. My dad fought in the war. I won't say almost lost his leg, not fighting, but in a train accident in London. And there was he was headed off to Africa, apparently, according to him at the time. And someone derailed the train, a little sabotage there. At least that's the story I get. And of course, we're talking about in the 40s. Yeah. And today, modern medicine would probably have rigged something up pretty good. But he had problems, the rest of his life with that. But no, he was in the British Army, but and had uncles that were in the RAF, and all of that. So yeah, it's a whole different outlook on the war when you're the little island that's under attack. So I think that was something. I always heard those stories. We talked about Dunkirk with that movie's success, and I think I told you this, Dennis. When my mom told me about Dunkirk, she was first time when I was a kid. She was crying, and I didn't quite understand that. I thought, well, what's going on here? Well, I've seen the movie now. I think I have a better understanding.
Okay. So what's next for you?
That's the question. I'm going to be sorry to leave the Journal-Star. I think this has been my lifelong learning class. I'll use that line again. I hope to keep learning. I want to keep writing. Not quite sure. You got some freelancey things out there that are appealing to me. I don't know if that's sustainable, so we'll see. I like the idea of media in general. So I want to sort of be around that. I'm old school though, because this stuff with the Facebook and all the other thing, I understand it barely. Thanks to Matt Dayhoff, I can pretend that I know it. But
Matt Dayhoff is our producer here of the podcast. He does a lot of other things, from taking photos to making sure our website's up to date and powerful and reaching a number of readers. Do you have anything to say to Steve?
Steve Tarter.
So will everybody here, and including our readers. So I want to thank you and appreciate everything you've done for us over the years.
Well,
and
it's my pleasure.
Don't be a stranger.
I won't be. And we're going to work to the very end here. We got a bunch of podcasts lined up this week, so we'll try to get more folks on here.
And you got a few more stories you got to file too before.
I do. Yeah, the editor here is on me. Yeah, I just found out I got my story on for Sunday now coming up, so I got the pressures on here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much, and soon you'll be hearing a few more things from Steve. But I want to thank him and thank everybody for listening.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you.